Welcome to the Whiskey Vault. Let's talk about toast and char. This was a bottle gifted by a Psalm. Not to have it reviewed, just donated to the vault. But Ian Zink is one of our Psalms. Fierce Whiskers. So there was a question in the comments. It was from Lisa Meum, I guess. Liza Meum. I'd love to see episodes about barrels themselves, the effects of toast, char, common, uncommon use barrel types, etc. I'm going to stick to one of those parts of that question in this video because that's a lot of questions in one question. And I'm just going to talk about toast and char because we haven't really done just that focus. So first, barrels. Why do they need to be toasted or charred? And the origins of this really come to purification. It was a way for people to clean a barrel that had previously held something else. They would burn it. And then they discovered that charred barrels, did better at keeping water fresh. And then it impacted flavor on other things. And over time, it became intentional. Wine industry was kind of the first to do it for flavor impact on purpose, sort of. But those early days are super hazy. But you buy a barrel, or you chop down an oak tree and you cut it into pieces of board size that you could make staves out of, right? The first thing that needs to happen is that wood needs to dry, because otherwise it's just full of sap. And if you let it dry out in the elements, this is called seasoning. You let the wood season, and it can be anywhere from 6 to 8 to 24 months, or in some cases more than 2 years. And what's happening as that wood sits is that it basically starts decomposing. And so that's a good thing. The chemical structure and the cellulose structure of the barrel starts to break down, and the sap and all of these other, the lignin and the hemicellulose and all of these things start to sort of come apart at a certain level. And that sort of on-purpose decomposition is what allows you to get things out of the wood when you char and toast it, and keep the negative things from bleeding from a fresh piece of wood into your spirit. I mean, you even get fungi that get involved in because these piles of wood are literally just sitting outside. Rain, snow, heat, doesn't matter, right? They're just breaking down and sitting out there. It softens things, it caramelizes things. There's a lot of things that happen over time. Now, there is another thing that you can do called kiln drying. It does not have the same impact. Just like people say you can fast age whiskey, and in Texas we can get a 10-year-old whiskey in 6 months because of our weather and our climate. That's the kilning versus seasoning, long-term seasoning. Kiln drying dries a whole bunch of the stuff out of the wood, but it does not account for the long-term oxidation, decomposition, breakdown that creates a whole other access to flavor components. So it's a cheap, easy fix when you don't have the patience to wait for seasoned barrels. And it absolutely changes the flavor of your spirit. There's no question about it. And almost any time I've picked up a spirit, there are certain notes I can pick up and go, kiln dried. This was kiln dried. It's just a thing. Kiln drying doesn't do any of the secondary long-term breakdown. Now, as that breaks down, it's ready, it's seasoned, you're gonna cut it, trim it, put it down, and form it into a barrel. And then you're going to either char or toast it. Now, historically, people charred it. Actually, in wine, it's more typical to toast or not do anything. In whiskey, it's more common to have a charred barrel. What we've learned from charring a barrel, by charring, we literally mean they've got a fire on the floor, they take a barrel that doesn't have a head on it, it's basically formed, but it's not sealed, and they just set the barrel over the fire, and it burns, and they flip it to the other side, and the whole inside gets burned. Anyway, so you get various levels of char that range from char 1, 2, 3, and very rarely 4. And all that means is how deep the charcoal layer is. I mean, the deeper the char, the deeper into the layer of wood you burn, right? And so a char 1 just looks like darkened, blackened wood. Char 2, you start to get some cracking of the surface. Char 3, you get true cracking and ribbing. And Char 4, they call it alligator char because it looks like a burnt log that you put out on a fire, right? Just cracked pieces of wood. And, peppermint. What this does is the char layer gives you a filtration level. So the more char, the more filtration you get. Also, there's a grid that you can look up online. You can see that, like, as you go deeper, these things narrow, these flavor impacts narrow, and these flavor impacts widen. And so the char filtration impact goes up, that char layer. The char layer of a barrel does not add flavor. Otherwise, Brita filters wouldn't work. It subtracts things, right? Now, behind that layer of char is what's called the red layer. And that's the part of the barrel where it got hot enough to alter the chemical structure of the wood, but not hot enough to char. When you char a barrel, that red layer is really paper thin. But that's where all the color comes from. That's where the caramelized wood sugars comes from. That's where most of the flavor impact that you associate with whiskey comes from that secondary layer. And then behind that is that natural wood structure that if you push into it, you get a whole other set of, a smaller subset of flavors, right? Now, you can change the ratios of those impacts by how much you char. Typically, Char 1 is going to bring you like a slight, light caramelized vanillin hint of smoky and a little bit more of the woody. Char 2 is going to be a little bit more intense on the smoky note, which you would think comes from the char, but it comes from the wood and the alteration of the wood impact. And it's going to get a little bit deeper on all of the vanillin flavors. 3 is where you start to get kind of a significant, bold expressions of things. And so if you want kind of a softer sweetness, you'll see people leaning into 2. If you want more of a forward into the tannins, into the deeper into the wood structure, you'll sometimes see 3 is the most typically used among bourbon distillers. 4, very rare. You get almost bitter notes of the wood starting to accent and come out at certain layers of that. And that's the heaviest char that way. I mean, otherwise you start breaking down the actual structure. You char a barrel so much it won't hold liquid anymore. So that's the idea of char, right? We're going to talk toast after we do this. This is Fierce Whiskers, a distillery in Austin, Texas, founded by 2 friends who are childhood friends who got into business together, who then made their money in the tech industry and then came to Texas and decided to make whiskey. They spent an astounding amount of money building one of the most beautiful and advanced and green distilleries in the U.S., definitely the state of Texas, and staffed it and just started producing and socking away whiskey barrels in mass quantities. I mean, compared to a distillery like us or even Andalusia, who's working off like a 200-gallon still or was, you know, like they came in with big equipment, big facilities, big rick house, and a big splash. They also didn't release any whiskeys on the market until they were ready to release their own stuff. They didn't source. They didn't do a really young 6-month bourbon. They waited until they felt it was ready. This one is batch 1 of their rye whiskey. Texas straight rye, 90 proof, 45% alcohol, at least 2 years old. And they said this one was, I think, an 18-barrel blend. Don't quote me on that, though. All right, so in the nose, immediately, it has that really, like, narrowed eucalyptus-y, pepperminty, kind of zesty note, and not a lot of darkness or depth. It's, man, spearmint. I keep coming back to spearmint. This is like, it's one of the more lighty, zesty, for lack of a better term, ryes that I've picked up. It's not quite as eucalyptus and green as MGP, but it's not Kentucky rye where it's like, this is what bourbon drinkers want when they make a rye. And it's not any of like the Monongahela or the, you know, hotter climate, like really deep and rich, or, you know, far north where you get these like really agricultural rye notes. It's very simple, very fresh, is for lack of a better word. And it tastes just like it smells. Imagine if you had a very lightly steeped black tea, just light, like you poured the hot water onto the tea bag and then immediately took the tea bag out. And then there's just a little hint of peppermint scattered through the tea. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the vanilla from the barrel is there, that, you know, caramelized vanillin, that's there. It's simple. It's a simple sweetness. If you sweetened the tea with a little touch of some sort of simple syrup or something. There's definitely no complexity. But I think what they were, I mean, I don't know. I didn't ask. But I think what they were going for was a very accessible, simple rye that would be a, okay, I'm not going to assume what they were trying to go for. What I'm experiencing is a very simple, non-complex rye that could easily be an entry-level rye for someone who's not used to drinking rye whiskey. You're not going to struggle with this. You're not going to find anything that will put you off of the rye grain. The rye grain is so quiet in this that you're only getting the black tea pepperminty notes. You're not getting any of the other really strong things that rye can bring to the table. And it seems like, according to all the stuff they've talked about, that they did that on purpose. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. It's nothing I would write home about, but I think that's the point. I would put this closer to like a really good quality, not in flavor, but a really good quality big brand budget release where their goal is not to change the world and be remarkable, but it's just to be accessible to the largest part of the population, right? Like, this is why people love Bullet. This is why people love, you know, Beam, or this is why people love Wild Turkey 80, and, you know, because it's accessible, and it's just good, well done, no flaws whiskey. Easy going. Easy going. Summer whiskey, maybe? Would probably be good on the rocks. Probably great in a cocktail, because it would play nice with just about anything, because it's nothing there to fight with anything, other than those high-floating vanilla, pepperminty black tea notes. Anyway, there you go. I haven't yet gotten to try any of their like really hardcore, this is a single barrel or single hard serious. I've only gotten to try their large scale, lower proof brand releases. But there you go. Okay, toast. Toast is different. So since so much of the flavor in whiskey aging in the barrel is in that red layer, when you char, that red layer is paper thin and then a varying depth of char depending on how much you char and then the barrel. If you toast the wood, what you do is instead of putting on a giant flame and just cooking it, you put it on a low heat, relatively speaking, and not direct contact. Woo, sorry. Excuse me. You put it on a lower heat and you kind of cook the wood. You literally toast the wood. I mean, there are companies doing infrared toasting, so it's not even direct flame, right? And as you do that low toast, what it does is it lets you like turn that red layer, like that's your first impact. So forget char, let's create that serious red layer. And the longer you toast, the wider that red layer gets. Right? So you can really dramatically increase that red layer that has a lot of the color and flavor impact without going nuts on char, and that's why you would toast. And so what you will often find, so for example, in toast profiles, you often get, I wrote this down, like a slight toast or a light toasting is very much just the same kind of vanilla caramel that you get as the red layer behind a char, right? When you do a more pronounced toast level, it can bring out baking spices in the wood, toasted oak. I know, right? Toasted oak, of course. Just baked bread and toasted oak in addition to these soft vanillins and sweetness. And when you get a really deep toast, you get almost smoky, coffee, chocolatey direction notes out of that wood. Now, a lot of distilleries They don't want to lose out on that char filtration impact that you get when you're aging whiskey, but they love that deeper red layer. And so it's becoming very common in distilleries from small to large in America to do a combination of toast and char. So you toast it, and then you put it into the char process and create that charcoal layer. And so I know a distillery right now that's doing Crowded Barrel, right, did a char to medium toast, right? And so what that meant from ISC, Independent State of Cooperage, was they do a medium toast layer through the toast process, and then they char the barrel to a char to. And you get the benefit of a deeper red layer, but you also get the benefit of that charcoal filtration. So that's the simplest version. I hope that answers your question. That's a very simplified version. You can go online and look up elaborate chemical breakdowns of what happens on toasts and chars and the actual chemical flavor notes that are created from each and that the combinations create. There's some great videos and blog content on the Independent State of Cooperage website from the makers and from people at ISC who've done all the nerdy chemical spectrograph studies on these things. It's an endless rabbit hole if you go down it. And if you're a nerdy like me, you'll find it very interesting. This whiskey with a little bit of water brought out more of the tea and less of the sweetness. And on the palate, got a little bit more bitter and a little more tea-like. Interesting. Cool. Well, cheers to you guys. I'm really glad you're here. Welcome to the Whiskey Vault, the only whiskey YouTube channel that does Char 5 on every video.